This video is a complete summary of all canon subject matter towards the series in question. It contains spoilers and details for numerous aspects to the story and its events, and is not meant to serve as a replacement to experiencing any of the pieces of media mentioned. Please support the official releases of the developers and their entries in the franchise.
That the book would not be destroyed as I had planned. It continued falling into that starry expanse of which I had only a fleeting glimpse. I've tried to speculate where it might have landed, but I must admit that such conjecture is futile. Still, questions about whose hands might one day hold my Myst book are unsettling to me. I know my apprehensions might never be allayed, and so I close, realizing that perhaps the ending has not yet been written.
In 1993, Cyan Worlds released Myst for Mac OS, with a Windows port soon to follow. It was an unexpected success for the company, due in part to its revolutionary graphics, accessible gameplay, and immersive world-building. The audience that the original game reached was something not yet seen in the youthful gaming industry, especially in the personal computer corner of the market. Through this success, Myst spawned a franchise, and was the best-selling PC game and series until nearly a decade later when it was passed by The Sims. The Myst series was known for leaving the player to connect the dots, and piece together not just how to complete an objective, but sometimes what that objective was to begin with. Cyan made it clear that even with sparse initial info, there was much to uncover. Second only to its mind-numbing puzzles, Myst prided itself most on its worlds. The original developers even rebranded themselves to emphasize this. The player can easily go from knowing nothing about their surroundings to becoming acquainted with its history, people, flora, and fauna in just a few hours. And of course, linking these worlds, characters, and events together is a story, one that connects the series and spans thousands of years with the full lore only available to those who look through everything. While the Myst lifespan wasn't the longest, it was robust. Over the roughly dozen years of the franchise's active development, 5 core games in the series were released: Myst, Riven, Exile, Revelation, and End of Ages. Additionally, there was a spin-off game titled Uru with subsequent expansions. Following Uru, a short-lived MMO named Myst Online Uru Live was released, which has maintained subtle relevancy through community efforts, and it filled in some blanks in the franchise lore. Finally, the canon included a book series consisting of the Book of Atris, the Book of Tiana, and the Book of Denai. All these pieces together form the structure of Myst's timeline, along with some other details made through announcements or comments of the game's staff to give added clarity. To help with the consistency and excessive information, I'll keep a note in the bottom with current year, the relation in time to the games, and the source of said information. Without further introduction then, let's begin the complete history of the universe of Myst. This story recounts the rise and fall of a family, a civilization, and quite a few ages. The first events ever recorded in the series are from nearly 10,000 years ago. The Dunni are the most famous and prominent race of non-humans in the Myst chronology. However, the story actually begins with a people known as the Ronei. Ronei practiced an ability known as registoi, or often simply called the art. This art was a mastery of the ability to write powerful books of various different worlds that they imagined. A master of the art could write in immaculate detail and elegance their vision of a world in all of its inhabitants, history, locales, as well as other flora and fauna. Upon completion, these writers would be able to physically travel to the incredible world that they had described. These worlds would become known as ages. To the Rone, ages were believed to have stemmed from a multiverse, visualized as a great tree of possibilities, all of which were created by the Maker, also called Yavo. As was orthodox to the religion, most believed that ages were already created and existed somewhere in the infinite multiverse, and that writers were simply creating a link to them via the art. However, some misguided individuals, who we will see later, believe that as writers of an age, they created that world out of thin air. By writing an age, they breathed life into a previously empty void, and were now their god. The other set of logistics of the art to keep in mind are the two types of books that were written by these masters. These were descriptive books and linking books. A descriptive book is the greater, larger, and more detailed version of an age. This is what the writer spends the bulk of their time on when creating an age. With the book completed, a link would be established to one of the infinite ages of the Great Tree. Afterward, a linking panel would appear on the first page of the book. When touched, a user could link to the age described in the linking book. No two descriptive books could link to the same age, and no descriptive book could be duplicated. Even if the two were written with the same text, they will link to two very similar but still different ages. Thus, they are crucial for a link and are normally kept safe after writing, as if they are damaged, the link is broken. They are always written in Denai language, believed to be the only language known to handle complex descriptions in a finite space. While writing a book meant finding a new branch of the infinite tree, it was observed that alterations can be made. Even when a link was established, there were probabilities in the age not set in stone by the book's description. Thus, in a way, additions and alterations could be made to a descriptive book without damaging a link, so long as it didn't contradict anything already written. This required extreme skill and attention to detail, as it could lead to risks in damaging or completely severing the link to an age. This can all be compared to a linking book. A linking book can be seen as a smaller, more portable version of a descriptive book. A linking book is written with the intention of being a reference to a descriptive book. Contained in the linking book are common combinations of paragraphs and descriptions that point to the original descriptive book. However, through pointing to an existing descriptive book, a linking counterpart would obtain its own linking panel on the front page, like a descriptive book. This made linking books much more practical for use in linking, along with the fact that a descriptive book can have multiple linking books pointing to it. Often, a descriptive book would be locked away unless it needed to be referenced or altered, while linking books would be used to, well, link to it. If they were damaged or destroyed, nothing would happen to the age they linked to, and travelers often carried linking books to their age of origin to link back whenever. Some without exceptional knowledge of the art needed additional power channeled to a linking book for them to function with only references, as we will see later. Some limitations do exist, however. A curious trait was that they needed to be written in the age they were linking to, and where they are finished is where the user will link, compared to a descriptive book where a writer could specify the linking point. However, a linking book could be written while the descriptive book is in another age, so long as the writer has extensive knowledge of it. A linking book could not be used to link from one part of an age to another, as linking implies, and thus requires, dimensional transfer. A linking book could actually be written in any language so long as it refers to specific Denai passages. A linking book is determined by its descriptive book. If a descriptive book is altered majorly, especially if this causes its link to shift to a closely resembling age, chances are the linking book would be rendered useless, as it now points to nothing. This is why alterations to the descriptive book must be made with a careful and skilled hand. Finally, and most importantly, neither descriptive nor linking books travel with you when you use them to link, but everything else on the traveler's person will. The Denai language was actually known as the Rone language because of the name of the original people. The Rone were a society of writers with guilds that revolved around the creation and upkeep of their incredible books. They resided in the age of Gartone and held a deep belief in Yavo the Maker and creator of the great tree of infinite possibilities. Rone were very similar appearance-wise to humans, with only slight differences in aspects such as facial structure. There was one obvious difference, however, and that was their lifespan. Often Rone would live well over 300 years old on their home age of Gartone. As with many stories, life seemed peaceful for this world, but tremendous power like the art often leads to tremendous complications. The story begins properly with the life of a gifted Rone writer. The young Rinaref was born on Gartone nearly 10,000 years ago, on a planet that was flourishing with masters of the art. He was able to join the Guild of Writers at the age of 5 and was quickly recognized for his talent and brilliance as a writer. He quickly grasped the intricacies of the art and produced incredible results by the time he became a guild master at the young age of 90. Guild masters were the second highest rank in guild hierarchy, second only to the guild's elder, the Grand Master. The current Grand Master would quickly come to odds with Rinaref, much to the latter's discomfort. While the current Grand Master remains nameless, their impact on Rinaref was absolute. When Rinaref was about 135 years old, his superior, the Grand Master, asked him to write a descriptive book to a new age, one that would cause Rinaref to question the teachings given to him, as well as his superiors. Rinaref was asked to create an expansive age that contained a simple, uncivilized race which would be eventually used by the Rone. While specifics are not present, the reasoning is likely exploitive, likely a means of creating a subservient serfdom or even slavery world. Much debate was brought about because of this, mainly between Rinaref and his master. Eventually, he refused the task and resigned from the guild. This was unprecedented and a bit nerve-wracking to the people, as what was basically the greatest writer among the Rone was no longer a part of the official guild, though this controversy was nothing compared to the turmoil to come amongst the Rone. Being the scholar he was, Rinaref not only created ages, but studied existing ones as well. He would frequent himself to Gartone's descriptive book and its inner workings. This, combined with his talent for the art, allowed Rinaref to see a bleak future for the age. He could see that Gartone was nearing its end. More specifically, Gartone's sun was dying, and thus Gartone itself would soon become cold and uninhabitable. It took a couple years to confirm his suspicions, but when Rinaref was about 150, this information was made public and preparations were made. Gartone would likely become uninhabitable in only about 60 years' time, and a new world was needed. Fortunately, creating worlds is not something the people of Rone are inexperienced in. The Guild of Writers banded to spend the next 6 decades creating a suitable replacement home world for the Rone, a world that would later be known as Terra-Ni. Rinaref, however, who had grown to distrust the general philosophy and teachings of the Rone, had other plans. Rinaref took on a young apprentice named Eilish, and together they spent Gartone's remaining lifetime writing an age of their own. Large, vast, and secluded, the book was finally ready in time for the grand exodus of the Rone. While the king of Rone actively encouraged all of his people to follow him and the bulk of the populace to Terra-Ni, he allowed small factions to go off into ages of their choosing. Over the past decades, Rinaref had convinced a few thousand Rone citizens who were loyal and respected the wise writer to go with him and his apprentice to their new age. The age was dubbed Denai, meaning a new beginning, but to the existing natives of the age, it would eventually grow to have another name: Earth. The exact time frame for this exodus was often brought into question, but after accessing more sources, the date of 7,656 BCE was found to be equivalent to the year of Rhone Exodus and the founding of Danae. This faction of Rhone would call themselves Danae to recognize their separation and pride of their new home. While Danae was vast and beautiful, Rhinaref led the exodus of his people to the caverns below the surface, as he thought surviving in harsher conditions would prove more favorably with their god, Yavo. These conditions were far from unbearable, and the Danae flourished under Rhinaref, who was quickly crowned the first king of Danae. His accomplishments included creating a new temple of Yavo for the Danae people, improving the ventilation of fresh air in the caverns, allowing for an extended societal stay, and he re-established the 18 major guilds, including a new Master Writers Guild. Rhinaref was extremely devoted to Yavo and his teachings. He thought that the guilds were created in service to Yavo, not the people, and this philosophy lasted throughout the future monarchs of Danae society. Rhinaref bore no children, and so passed the title of king upon his death to the first Grand Master of Danae's Guild of Writers and his former apprentice, Eilish. An enormous portion of the history of Danae can be told through its monarchy succession. Though often a period of rule can be either brief or without much information recorded, for the sake of brevity we'll not linger longer than we need to, but the majority of this portion of our journey will be spent going through the 34 kings of Danae. Eilish, like his predecessor, was popular. He further helped develop the Danae people into a group they could be proud of, taking the good from their Rhone heritage and adding what they perceived to be the righteous path of their people. Eilish's most notable accomplishment was the construction of a common library in Danae, allowing for any citizen of any stature to have public access to the various ages written. Unlike Rhinaref, however, Eilish bore children, though it was not until he raised his third son, Shomat, before he decided that he had found someone that shared his philosophy and was a worthy successor. At the age of 350, Eilish passed away, allowing the first Danae-born king to ascend the throne. Shomat was next in line to the throne of Danae. He was also a skilled member of the Guild of Writers before taking the throne. His brothers, whose throne was denied, actively tried to cause instability within the court. This, amongst other corrupt thoughts within King Shomat, caused controversy. He ordered the building of an extravagant royal palace, which became much more luxurious than anything else in the caverns. He also believed that ages and their inhabitants were written to serve Danae, rather than the other way around. He started becoming more and more ruthless. He had a garden age written for his personal use, and when natives of said age planned to revolt, he had it rewritten to become uninhabitable to said race. In response to his jealous brother's plan to overthrow Shomat, he tricked them into entering a death book, a form of linking book that when entered the traveler would be immediately killed by the environment, often a trap, lava pit, or simply a deadly planet. This was of course reacted to strongly by the people of Danae, and thus a prophet was assigned to the king to give them guidance in the righteous philosophy of Yavo. She performed admirably, and as a result, Shomat became more respectable in his rule. This set the tradition of the king to choose a prophet to guide them during their tenure. Because of his deeds, Shomat decided it was best for his family line to end and pass the throne to the son of a close friend. This newly crowned king was Jakreen. The first non-writer king, Jakreen was a guild master in the Guild of Stonemasons, another of the 18 major guilds. These guilds were modeled after those in Garternay, but had more limitations, as well as monitoring was put in place to avoid the corruption that was prevalent originally. Jakreen made the most of his architecture expertise. He led construction of both the King's Arch and the Temple of the Great King. Tragedy struck this king, however. His son fell ill to a fatal disease that claimed his life at only 10 years old, while his wife passed away around 10 years after that. Jakreen took his mind off things by building a starting settlement of what would be Danae's main capital city, built on the coast of the Danae Lake, a city later known as Igura. While Jakreen would eventually remarry and have a son and 2 daughters, he died saddened as the weight of loss from his first marriage carried with him to his grave. Chakrin's son, Visha, would ascend to the throne. Visha's reign was uneventful for the most part, but it's noted that he was extremely religious as opposed to his father, who rejected religion after tragedies befell him. Visha would incorporate stricter laws regarding things such as marriage and adultery. Some were pushed away by these stricter personal conventions that were being forced on the populace from Visha's rule. Visha had a total of 5 sons. However, his youngest, Mararan, was almost killed and fell into a coma while exploring an age. Healers advised Visha that his son would never reawaken. Despite opposition from doctors and the church, Visha proclaimed to deny that Yavo would heal his son. Despite the odds, Visha kept his faith, and 3 years later, his son was revived. Visha would pass on the throne to this youngest son, believing him to be a symbol of rebirth, which had swayed the populace's opinions on the faith. Mararan was a member of the Guild of Maintainers before his coma. He was less strict and withdrew many of the imposing rules set in place by his father. He worked hard to re-establish institutions such as minor guilds, which would aid the education of Deny. He was also quite the hedonist, engaging in frivolity as well as recreational drinking and drugs. While not a stern leader, he was well liked, and that's about it, honestly, with Mararan's rule. He would pass on the throne to his son, Kareen. Kareen was a guild captain in the Guild of Linguistics, who specialized in language and communication with peoples native to other ages. Still, even hundreds of years later, Kareen's grandfather, Visha, had a lingering impact on the Deny. Many sects and groups arose opposing Visha's strict teachings and certain rules that were still in place, and numerous individuals thought they had the right to exercise Yavo's judgment on anyone lesser to them. The largest and most dangerous of these were known as the Judges of Yavo. They had secretly written an age known as Pento, with natives that the judges thought could be easily manipulated into a warrior race that would fight for them. Unfortunately, they were correct. The judges amassed their army and attacked the Deny Palace. With his wife soon to give birth, King Kareen ordered his family to evacuate. His family were able to warp to a private royal age that Kareen had made for just such an occasion. For the next 30 years, the Pento War raged in Deny. Kareen himself stayed in the city, leading the city guard and militia against the judges and the Pento, but it was not enough. At the age of 243, Kareen was assassinated by Pento warriors, throwing the city into chaos. Legend says that Alcendar was born under the King's Arch, while his family was escaping the palace to a secret linking book to a hidden age. While he remained hidden during the Pento War, his uncle, along with some advisors, kept him and his family informed of the events in Deny. This included the death of his father when Alcendar was 29. His uncle advised the newly crowned king to wait, strategize, instead of immediately returning to Deny. Alcendar was wise and heeded the advice of his uncle. In the weeks that passed, the judges who had seized control of Deny grew concerned that the leader of the Pento was becoming too powerful and uncontrollable, and so they had him killed. This caused civil war within the Pento in terms of deciding a proper heir, which caused them to spread thinly throughout the city. Hearing news of this from his uncle, Alcendar made his move. He assembled a small force and returned to Deny, quickly gaining additional followers. He quickly reclaimed the palace and established safe zones. He allied with one of the princes of Pento, Mekar, and offered to write his tribe a new age if they would help fight against the judges and quell the other factions of the Pento. Alcendar was good on his word, writing an age for the Pento and sending leaders of the judges to prison ages with no linking books and thus no means of escape, where they spent the remainder of their lives. During his proper rule, Alcendar kept his focus on returning to the principles established by Rhinaref, the first king, to forget the homeland and focus on why they were in Deny. Alcendar opted to not have an official advisor, and merely kept a prophet as a figurehead. Secretly, he worked with writers and healers on a plague that could be used as a weapon in case of emergency. Unfortunately, this weapon would be needed sooner rather than later. When Makar, the former Pento ally to Deny, came through a linking book given to him by a judge of Yavo and commanded a siege of Deny, the war was not yet over. Makar was successful in killing Alcendar's wife and 2 sons, until eventually the Great King killed Makar himself. Just 2 days later, in an act of vengeance, he ordered the plague to be released into the new Pento age. In just 3 days, the entire population of Pento was killed. Not just them, though. Some Pento with other books from judges linked to other ages and infected other cultures. The plague was engineered such that the Deny would be immune, but various chemists feared that it had the potential to mutate into something that could harm its makers. Books to Pento were found and burned, but guilt weighed on the king's shoulders. 35 years later, Alcendar revealed to the public that he released the plague to Pento and asked to be locked away in the temple of the Great King for his wrongdoings. He left the son of the Grand Master of the Guild of Writers, Sorath, a will that would give instructions on how to open the temple, which asked would be read only after 6 months had passed. They obliged, and Sorath would become temporary king. However, after the time had passed, the will was read aloud to Deny, and it revealed that there was no way to break the seal, and Sorath would be crowned the new king. Some thought to break it by force, but were vehemently opposed to breaking a direct order from the king. The Temple of the Great King was renamed to the Tomb of the Great King, as Alcendar was presumed dead. Though some held out hope for the eventual return of the Great King, Alcendar's legacy would be mixed and thought differently for centuries, but no one truly knows the eventual fate of the King of the Pento War. Solath was in such genuine shock that his rule would become permanent that virtually no one questioned his knowledge of the will's contents. By comparison, Solath's rule was uneventful. However, there was some religious upheaval due to Alcendar's actions. A famous book, the Book of Nemea, was written which denounced the Great King and gained some supporters. Solath tried to maintain unification, which included spending resources to build new districts for frivolity and the arts, which did excite people, and culture remained stable. He received some controversy after remarrying following the death of his first wife, and even more when a son born of his new wife would become the new heir to the throne, a son named Maerta. Maerta's reign was much more turbulent than his predecessor. He proposed some unorthodox teachings that were the first to go actively against the beliefs of Rhinaref. He was likely manipulated by his mother, Jolatha, who was a member of the cult known as the Tree, which believed the books buried with Alcendar held great power. Against the advice of most of Deny, Maerta built a temple of the Great Tree, along with temples for other cults that some could worship at. Eventually, these became more prevalent than the Temple of Yavo, and eventually, this temple became devoid of worshippers. Maerta attempted to change rules and make reformations for standards that had been in place since the second king Eilish. These were met with firm opposition from people such as Tremal, a Grand Master of Writers. Angered, Jolatha ordered him to be killed. This backfired for the queen and caused him to be seen as a martyr against the king's propositions. Following the beliefs of the Tree, Jolatha convinced the king to force open the seal of the Great King Alcendar. Books were taken, along with certain items claimed to be on the person of the Great King, and they were moved to the Temple of the Tree. However, this would be fate's final straw for the manipulative mother of the king. Jolatha died just 2 days later of unknown causes. Maerta was extremely fearful of this, believing it to be a curse for breaking the seal, and in response, closed the tomb of the Great King once again, and created a new seal, making it even stronger than before. However, as it would soon become known, the damage had already been done. Maerta's final years were spent with his wife until he was poisoned at the age of 267. It was unknown who could have done the deed, but Maerta's enemies were high, and the suspects were many, one of which was his eldest son Gan, who Maerta ironically left as the primary heir to the throne. Gan despised his father's lack of a backbone, especially in making decisions for himself. While not extremely religious towards Yavo, he did condemn the actions taken by his father and grandmother. However, he didn't have much time to take action, as the cause of Jolatha's sudden death came to light. The books removed from the tomb of the Great King were discovered to hold a mutated version of the plague cast upon the Pento, and as a result, an epidemic grew in Deny. Most actually blamed this illness on the Great King, as he decided to cast a plague on the Pento in the first place. Gan was likely a victim of Alcendar's plague, and served the shortest reign of any king, 55 years, and yet was still fortunate enough to have a son. Benasharin was the youngest king of Deny to ascend the throne at the age of 20. The young king lacked strong leadership or consistency. He would often spend his time making speeches, offering prayers to whoever would listen. This might be Yavo, the tree, or any other cult of Deny. All during this time, healers and chemists were struggling to find a cure for Alcendar's plague. Infertility rates were high, and Benasharin could not find an heir before his death, and thus passed on the throne to his uncle, Hemelin. Hemelin was a member of the Guild of Healers, and was extremely dissatisfied that public opinion of the guild was poor. Hard to blame them, as a cure was looking more and more unattainable by the year. However, King Hemelin held out hope. He believed that a cure existed in one of the ages of the books of old from the initial arrival of the Deny, specifically the Book of Bereni. However, these books have been lost almost since the arrival of the Deny. Hemelin was commanding, though, and had greater power shown than his nephew tenfold. However, he became ill and bedridden for years, with doctors claiming it would be fatal. There he met a healer named Leyland, who would care for him during his illness until he miraculously recovered. Hemelin insisted that his recovery was thanks to his motivation to keep living one more day so he could see his lover Leyland once more. Leyland's deeds to Deny would not be finished, as through her research she eventually uncovered the Book of Bereni, where flora was discovered that could be mixed into a drink used to help the body combat the plague. In 6 years' time, the plague was declared eradicated, and the lovers wed. As a symbolic gesture, Hemelin did not pass on the throne to his offspring, but to Negan, the first child born in a post-plague Deny. Negan was responsible for development into major fields, the advancements of the fine arts, and the continuation of his predecessor's further development at the Guild of Miners. Both these expansions, in culture and in physical areas, became known as the start of the Deny Renaissance. Negan led the development of a new council building to be built on the Tomb of the Great King, which served as a symbol of hope and rebirth. He also encouraged the public to save their wealth for future generations in a shared treasury, guarded by a set of puzzles, which would become heavily ingrained in Deny tradition. After his achievements, Negan would leave the throne in the hands of his third son, Hinash. Hinash was a member of the Guild of Stonemasons, and as a result was deeply interested in continuing the expansion of the Deny cave system. He would happily continue the development of advancements being made by the Guild of Miners. Hinash also pushed for better relations with other cultures. Soon, the transfer of goods and culture between ages was growing more accepted and prevalent. People were emigrating to Deny more and more. Hinash would have 4 children with his first wife, but when she died, he remarried to a non-Deny outsider, which was unheard of at the time. Unfortunately, he bore no children with his second wife, and so he left the throne to the youngest child of his first wife, Nidra. Niger was known for continuing the king's effort to increase expansion within the caverns. However, it was his mission to increase the motivation of the Deny public towards expansion. He was able to push these agendas through his exceptional speeches and charisma, along with the sculpting and carving talents of his good friend Lakir. Together, along with Nidra's brother, they set out creating 4 new districts within Deny, expanding it greatly. Nidra had no sons of his own, so he left the throne to the oldest of his brother, Rakeri. At this point, the Deny civilization had existed for 3,000 years, and for the first time enormous dissent was weighed in on the current king. An intelligent prophet, Devar, was a devoted follower of the great king and Yavo. He believed that the Deny Renaissance was a period of religious confusion amongst the people, and focus needed to be returned. Devar was charismatic and motivational, and often would overshadow the presence of the king himself, even losing a formal one-on-one debate. However, Rakeri had the humility to accept Devar's skills, and asked to make him his main prophet. After Rakeri's ignorance, he asked his people for forgiveness from him and his predecessor's deviations from Renaref's teachings. Thus began a period of renovation of the poor areas of Deny and the unification of separated classes. Rakeri and Devar died a year apart, and the crown was given to Rakeri's son, Tehara. Tehara was, quite frankly, one of the most selfish and deceitful kings of Deny. He would order extravagant ages written at the cost of writers. He would have multiple mistresses, and would kill many people he found to be impeding his own happiness, including the Grand Master of the Guild of Miners. However, he was a master of manipulation and secrecy. Most of these deeds were never found out until much later. Tehara was mostly indifferent to the populace, and considering most were still satisfied following the motives left by Tevar and Rakeri, Tehara was considered a decent king at the time. Tehara left the throne upon his death to his 3rd son, Tiamel. Tiamel was also fairly self-centered, but was less severe, but also was less skilled at hiding it. He would spend most of his time bathing in self-luxuries. However, his wife was a strong leader and showed a high example of strong beliefs and purposes. One of the most notable events was when a colossal digging machine named the Stone Eater was christened. Tiamel took most of the credit, much to the dismay of Naman, the Grand Master of the Guild of Miners. But regardless, expansion of the cave systems continued. Tiamel would leave the throne to his son, Kedri. Contrary to his father, Kedri was an immensely popular king. Most agreed that this was because of the massive influence his mother placed on him. Kedri was a man of the people, leading a number of proposals that would benefit the lower classes, including the creation of a residential district filled with affordable housing. He walked through the streets and attended events with the populace. Because of all this, he is often cited as the most popular king in the history of Deny, and was loved until he passed away at the age of 329, passing the crown on to his son, Lemashal. Lemashal fancied himself as a sort of illusionist. He practically forced the establishment of the minor guild of magicians. He also established the Relima, a sort of secretive intelligence group to keep track of potentially dangerous factions in Deny. Lemashal was also known for his influence on outsider cultures, trying to establish freer trade with them and more peaceful dealings. He also remarried to an outsider after his first wife passed away. There was debate as to whether a half-outsider would be allowed to take the throne. To curb public unrest, Lemashal signed into law the council's movement of a king needing to be of pure Deny blood. Lemashal thus left the throne to a son of his cousin, Ishek. Ishek was a mix of Kedri and Lemashal, the 2 men who came before him. Like Kedri, he focused on the people and preferred to view himself on even footing with them, and like Lemashal, he also gave a focus towards improving non-Deny cultures and helping them expand. The main event during Ishek's rule was when his wife was kidnapped by a group of natives from the age of Yamas. They used Deny linking books to escape, and made impossible demands of the Deny people in return for Ishek's wife. It was actually discovered that the Yamasans were being paid by a faction of isolationist Deny who wanted to sow the seeds of distrust with other cultures. Ishek and the Relima uncovered the plot, and Ishek's wife was recovered. Controversy with how relations with other tribes should follow were still lingering, however, and they would continue into the reign of Ishak's son, Loshmanesh. Loshmanesh was supportive of mingling with other cultures, but was also one to put more strict regulations into place. These would become as the Loshmanesh laws, which seemed to be established as a result of the incident that befell his mother. They essentially stated that the crime of creating or trading illicit ages or coercing outsiders to commit crimes would be sentenced to life imprisonment on a prison age. There was adamant protest from some of the populace who thought that Denai should be sealed off. The group started to become a majority. This was until Loshmanesh became a martyr for his cause, when he was assassinated by the same group that led the kidnapping of his mother. He was succeeded by his nephew, G. G lacked much of a backbone during his reign and didn't hold much of an opinion. He sided with whoever was making a convincing argument with him at the time. During this time, a prophet dubbed the Watcher rose to prominence, and he spoke of a reading of the future that saw a great destruction of Denai which would take place. One of the Watcher's great prophecies was of a family that all fit various roles and tales to change the Denai: the rebuilder of pride, the burdened one, the writer of dreams, the grower, and the sons of the burdened one. The grower was the one with the most power, and leaning towards the supernatural, in fact. Though these prophecies lingered in the writings of the Denai, they would not see the light of day for millennia. G himself was the first king to have a divorce. Two, in fact. Most of G's reign was one of inaction, and because of the lack of firm leadership, Denai became divided. The classes would separate, and the people felt they lacked guidance considering how much power they wielded as writers. G would eventually leave the throne to the son of a close friend, Demath. Most of the public weren't happy with G's reign, but they were both surprised and pleased with the decision to shift power to one outside of the family. There was an immediate order on enforcing a ban on links that weren't deemed necessary to deny. Relations with outsiders started to become more restricted. He even went on to denounce the Watcher, and certain groups began associating with outsiders more discreetly. More people started joining major guilds, but they would also become more expensive to afford. Crime was overall cut down during the reign of Demath as well. The Reli Ma was expanded, and eventually the leader of a dangerous cult known as the Blood of Yavo was found and imprisoned. In terms of technological advancements, the stonemasons developed an early fusion compounding technology, which would eventually lead to the development of the hardened crystal, commonly used by the Denai, called Nara. Eventually, Demath passed away, and left the reign to his firstborn son, Yebel-Shan. Yebel-Shan held similar beliefs to his father, and was less of a strong leader. The Blood of Yavo eventually kidnapped Yebel-Shan's son and asked for the release of Goshen, the leader that Demath had imprisoned earlier. The Reli Ma were asked to find the son, but it was discovered the Secret Service had a mole in the ranks and was a member of the Blood of Yavo, so progress was halted. Yebel-Shan gave in to the demands and released Goshen, only for him to discover his own son dead on the steps of the palace a few days later. Isolationists were a minority of the Denai populace but were gaining popularity every year. The society became very split. In an effort to shift attention from this divide, Yebel-Shan ordered a restructuring of the major guilds which reduced restrictions on their self-development, a change received well by the guilds. An explosion on the age of Myaenas brought strength to the isolationists, as Yebel-Shan put more resources into finding the stopgap of information in the ranks of the Reli Ma. Yebel-Shan passed without any children, and left the throne to the husband of his younger sister, a man named Emin. A member of the Guild of Illusionists, Farish, appointed by Yebel-Shan to look into the Reli Ma's corruption, discovered 2 moles during Emin's reign. They were quickly taken care of by the king, and Farish became a silent hero as a result. Later, a cult known as One Denai was found to be the perpetrators of the explosion on Myaenas and were imprisoned. 2 new food ages were established, Shimas and Herias, with a variety of fruits and vegetables non-native to Denai. The popularity of these ages helped improve non-isolationist sentiment with the natives of Shimas and Herias. Some public-owned islands in Denai became privatized as well. The public ferry system was also improved from the main Denai city, Agura, to the other surrounding islands. Emon set aside one of these islands to become a cultural center, and gave it to be shared between the guilds of artists, musicians, and actors. Emon passed away popularly, and gave the throne to his firstborn son, Mayemon. The first event during his reign was unfortunately another plague outbreak. This one occurred in the district of Noerl, and as a result most became frightened and started to evacuate Agura. Mayemon summoned guild and grandmasters of the Guild of Healers to the palace, but was disappointed by their lackadaisical stance and lack of motivation. Meanwhile, a guild captain named Irem seemed motivated, and Mayemon gave him the resources to eventually develop a cure. Mayemon as a result formally appointed Irem to the Grand Master of Healers, while expelling the former master. With new digging technologies, a new industrial section, Uran, was created. Mayemon was more shifted towards technological advancements than religion during his reign. Eventually, his son Asham fell extremely ill and passed away, resulting in Mayemon renaming Uran to Ashamem and falling deeply depressed. Most decisions went through Mayemon's prophet, Trisari. Mayemon would later appoint his nephew Adesh to be his successor. Adesh would also seek advice from Trisari, and would be more religious than his uncle. A new prophet, Gish, appeared, similar to Tavar, but Gish only praised Yavo and criticized Tavar and the Great King. Gish became extremely popular, despite Adesh's constant arrests and denouncements of him. Eventually, in a fit of rage and frustration, Adesh ordered the Relima to kill Gish. This action was met with heavy criticism from the populace. Gish became a martyr, and eventually resulted in the assassination of Adesh, according to rumors, by one of his own advisors. His firstborn son, Lenarin, succeeded him. Lenarin denounced his father's actions, and started to make plans to disband the Relema. He also announced that he promised to eliminate outsider involvement. Ages requiring outsider involvement were slowly beginning to be phased out for ones without native peoples. Lenarin pushed forward with a plan brought up by Mayemon, which was to build a tunnel from the island Denai to the city, and planned for more expansion of residential and cultural districts, one in particular, the Lenarin district of laborers. The tunnel was cancelled due to resistance from the island residences, who liked their isolation, with travel limited by boat. Lenarin passed away, but not before the Relima was officially finished in Denai. He was succeeded by his youngest son, Asemlef. During Asemlef's rule, he continued the technological advancements of construction and expansion, while also encouraging philosophical discussion. Factions worshipping the Watcher, Gish, and Tavar all began to form, and Asemlef welcomed intermingling and discussion of their beliefs. There were common rumors of Asemlef using servants for extremely cruel purposes, however, including hunting them for sport, or staging them in gladiatorial-style battles. Whatever the case, it seemed to be mostly in secret. Regardless, assemblies focused on expansion, construction, and offering benefits to all classes, except royal servants, apparently. He would pass the throne to his youngest son, Jaron. Similar to his father, Jaron continued to support construction and renovation amongst all classes. Most violent factions were at the time dissolving, and he was able to focus efforts on the progression of the city without many consequences. Some say the greatest expansion in all of Denai was during the reign of Jaron. Jaron saw the introduction of both the Rockbiter and Burrower, while overseeing the completion of the Rudena Passage, the widest new tunnel ever built in Denai. He would pass on the throne to his third son and penultimate king, Rikuth. Rikuth had uncommonly unenvious siblings, who would go on to be extremely caring and reliable advisors. This family would prove to lay the foundation for the shift to a council in years to come. Expansion continued, and Rikuth would marry a supporter of Gish and the fallacy of the Great King, Hisha. Rikuth would begin to lean towards the intermingling of outsiders more, claiming their influence in Denai's history and culture shouldn't be understated. In the years that followed, however, he became tired of Hisha and her views. He expelled her from the palace, along with one of their sons, Karath, who was most influenced by her. Near the end of his reign, Denai was enormous, but people were divided in their classes and in their religious opinions. As the legend goes, Rikuth chose one of his older sons to be a successor, but on his deathbed, he could see his son Karath sailing through the King's Arch on a boat with a proud lizard on its prow. He had come to deliver news of the death of his mother, Hisha. In that moment, Rakuth felt the hand of Yavo, telling him to make Karath the next king of Danae. Karath was extremely influenced by his mother, and thus Gish and Yavo, but also from seeing the relationship his father had with his advisors. Karath would craft his arguments detailing how the certain ways his people had been ruled for the last thousands of years have been wrong. He decreed that power should be in the hands of the guilds, as the Danae have always been as strong as the guilds and their protection. Most of the population were losing the loyalty of the kings and supported this proposal. He ordered construction of a new guild hall, and the tomb of the great king became further buried under massive buildings, which were built for government and guilds. By the end of his reign, Danae was isolationist, and convinced of the beliefs of Karath and Gish, he abdicated the throne to 5 lords, which became the Danae Council. The time of kings was over. Karath became the most famous king moving forward and came to represent all kings. The Arch of Kings was renamed the Arch of Karath, and his coronation was commemorated as a holiday. For the next 1,000 years, the council led the people of Danae towards continued structure and expansion of the caverns. It was a relatively uneventful time for the Danae, but considering the history in the time of kings, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. The people became content during this time of relative ease and peace. It had been about 8,000 years since Rainraf had arrived. Time began to be spent once again towards creating lavish ages. The garden craze of the 8100s began, with many of what would be dubbed rest ages becoming popular. Ages such as Edergira and Ederkemo were written and open to the public. A force of maintainers became established, which was a security force amongst Danae, used to maintain order with a sense of less strictness compared to the Relima. They were based on the age of Gari Sen. The Age of Teledan was written by the current Master of Writers, Mararan, as a present for the Master of the Guild of Caterers, Hinash. It is filled with edible mushrooms and spores, some of Hinash's favorites for ingredients. Later, they were mined for resources that nearly destroyed the entire age. In the 9300s, human timeline, 1600s, a gifted rider is born to 2 Danae, named Kalis and Tessera, a boy named Itris. For about 10 years, exploration begins to shift upward, and the council asks for an attempt to be made to dig a tunnel to the surface. This leads to the creation of the Great Shaft, a vertical tunnel which will aid in the construction of a means of getting to the surface. However, after the deaths of 2 workers and the near death of a friend of Itris's, Veovis, the project ended. However, the link to the surface wouldn't end there. In fact, this was just the push needed to ultimately allow 2 worlds to meet. But in order to construct a true passage, some help needs to be made on the other side of the tunnel, from the human-owned surface world. Thank you so much for watching. It means so much that you were able to tune into this portion of the journey. This project has been a long time coming, and I've been extremely excited to finally put the finished product out there. Credits are on screen now, but I'd be remiss not to mention the direct inspiration for this video, Valkyrie Aurora's Drakengard summary video. It's incredible, and I'll post a link in the description below. Production on part 2 of this series is already underway, and you can follow me on Twitter or Twitch for the latest updates. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like or a subscribe, and feel free to comment as well. Thanks again for sticking around, and I hope you all have a good one, whenever and wherever. This was Krimic. See you guys next time.